Hello, another video, you lucky people. Yes, it's time for Whovian High Council number 3, Rosa. So Matt, take it away.
Righto. So yes, Roses after full house of positivity for the Ghost Monument last week. We had Rose for this one, and as we sort of mentioned, our little concerns that this one could go wrong this week, but also had the ingredients for quite an iconic and successful episode. So, opening thoughts. Kai, since we haven't spoken to you in like God knows how long, kick it off.
Hello, Gustavo the Fibster, back and better than ever. Well, as for Rosa, I thought it was probably one of the best historical stories of the new series, definitely, and I think it did a great job of handling not only the subject matter it was trying to handle, but also did a really good job of actually establishing the companion dynamic with the Doctor much better than the previous 2 episodes have been. So I say, for the series so far, this has definitely been the strongest installment.
All right, and James?
Pretty excellent television in general, not just a great Doctor Who episode, just a great piece of television. It was well thought out. The reviews worried me in the fact that they were like, it maybe pushes it a bit too far with the educational aspect to the point it becomes preachy. I read, but I didn't feel that at all really in this episode. I thought it's just a class bit of telly, and I think this is definitely going to rise up in the iPlayer watches for people who didn't watch it live, because I think this is going to become a form of event television. This episode, it's been number 1 on Twitter for the past since it's aired, really. So I think it's pretty successful.
Very good, Luke.
Yeah, I did say last week that I was very much worried for this episode, and I was worried on the build up to it. But actually, going into it, watching it, I think that cinematic style that they've got going at the moment really grasped me and pulled me into it. And then I just enjoyed the writing a lot. It was very well written. It had that very heavy subject matter, which we'll get onto later, but it balanced that well with also a bit of fun as well for the TARDIS team. Like it had the heavy subject matters. It didn't lighten them up a bit, but it also had some good moments. And yeah, I think it was very, very well done.
All right, and Ben.
I thought this episode could either go 2 ways, incredibly good or just shite. But thankfully, it was a bloody brilliant story. It was raw, powerful, and just a brilliant emotional story. Well, I'll happily admit I did tear up a little bit at the end. So yeah, brilliant stuff. Best episode of Series 11. Great stuff.
Very good. And for me, I think it goes without saying, this is probably the best of the series so far. And yeah, like we sort of mentioned last week, really, this one really had the ingredients to be, truly, massive episode for the series, to get like the mainstream public talking and all that sort of stuff. And it definitely succeeded, I thought. So I'm very impressed. And that sort of leads into the subject matter of the episode. Now, it's one, this sort of information came out of this one, and how it's going to sort of like tackle racism in the 50s and all that. As like Doctor Who fans, especially after the Moffat era, there comes the concerns, everything like the Moffat era, like the political matters they try to tackle. It felt so shoehorned for example, like Thin Ice, as we mentioned last year, the whole sort of racist thing in that, and how awkward that felt. Of course, Bill being gay, and how that was sort of mentioned in every single episode. So when it came to political matters being like tackled in the show, there's always that concern on how natural it's going to feel, if it will flow well. So now we've seen the episode. Was it points you thought was a bit too shoehorned, or was getting a bit too much, or was it all handled perfectly? So Ben.
I've seen some people say that this episode's really offensive, but at the end of the day, this is history. This is hardline facts. This happened, and I feel like they did a really good job. I'm glad that they didn't shy away from the topic, that the whole story dealt with it, whether it be the companions dealing with it. I thought that as a whole, it really didn't feel shoehorned. It was very much prominent. It wasn't, rubbing it in your face, because it was very true to the history of the events. And yeah, I think they did a wonderful job with it, really. I'm glad that they did it, because I've seen a lot of positivity about it, and on Twitter, really, that kids have been talking about it, going, why did we do that? Why was segregation a thing? So I think it just shows that it's been a massive talking point, and I feel like the episode handled it beautifully, really.
Very well said, and that's never sort of like popped out to me like post reaction to this episode. I mean, all the reviews have been pretty much all mostly been positive. But like one of like the headlines, like the trend on Twitter was fans going to mayhem over controversial episodes. Like, hang on, I'm pretty sure it wasn't controversial, but you know, it's just a matter in hand. But yeah, okay, Luke.
Yeah, I think it handled it very well. I think it's interesting that it's been said before, the past is at the best in Doctor Who when it's portrayed almost as this alien world. It sort of like feels so different from what we live in. And I think that's very real here. There's that very real sense of threat towards Ryan and Yaz in this story. And I love how it was initially set up with that whole scene with the glove. You know, it's not mentioned before that really, but you have that scene before in the what's it called, on the bus right at the start back in 1947, I think it was, or something like that. And that obviously set up, that was a very nice little scene to set up the worlds here. Then we skip forward to the Doctor and crew just walking around all casual, and then suddenly like the slap in the face Ryan got, it was a slap in the face to the audience as well. And it was a very hard-hitting scene, I feel. And I thought before that the best stuff that handles this topic is the stuff that really does make you angry. It really gets under your skin, and you feel for those characters in that situation, and you very much do want to like jump into the screen and actually do something. And it's almost heartbreaking to them that you can't, in a way, because it's just terrible people. And in some ways it's more terrible than some of the villains we've got. Like, I think if it's a Dalek or a Cyberman, it's because it is removed from humanity, it's not as bad. But here it is actual human beings doing this stuff, and it really does get under your skin in some scenes. It really does make you want to jump in and take action, and I think that is what is brilliantly done here, and it very much does promote that reaction from you. And I really did appreciate that it went full on with that. It didn't try to not hide anything, because obviously that's not the sort of episode this is. That is very much in the forefront, but at the same time it didn't let you forget it. It constantly had it there. That scene in the hotel room was very tense, where you've got the police officer there just asking questions, whatnot, and it sort of is a bit cliche in a way, but it's very well done nevertheless. And I did really appreciate that scene, and quite a few other scenes as well in this story. The time-travelling racists, I'm not so sure about. I think that was a bit weak, but at the same time, it was a means to an end. And I think the story that came out of that is very well done, very well played out. And you really do feel for these characters, and especially Ryan in this situation. And I think everything is played out beautifully. Like, it's also awkward for what's his name, Graham, as well, like him not wanting to be there, him not wanting to be a part of this white segregation towards Rose on the bus there, but he's got to be, just so that numbers are up, and it's almost heartbreaking for him in a way to be there. And I think that was very well played out, because it's not just focusing on the two minority characters with Yaz and Ryan. It also does explore the impact on Graham as well, and how that does take a toll on him. And the Doctor is much better than Capaldi did, where he just punches the racists in the face. It's a lot better than that. And the message isn't as full on as it was there in Thin Ice. It's much better here, and almost more heartbreaking in a way, that you do have this world that feels alien in a way, this world that doesn't feel quite like our own, but actually was, unfortunately. That was how it was back then in like the South of America and other places as well, sadly. And I really do appreciate that it did take that hardline approach and didn't pull any punches. It went full on with it. And yeah, I definitely appreciate that it went there and, you know, had the balls to do it. And yeah, I think I've gone on enough now, but I really do love the approach it took.
All good points, all good points. And Kai?
Yeah, I think the way they handled it was really well done. One of the obviously big worries you have when you go into it is, will they handle it the way they did before? We mentioned before how it was handled, the racist was handled in Thin Ice, and that was obviously a bit cringe, and they shied away from it. And it kind of links back to a personal gripe I had in like the period fiction, how people are always written as not having prejudices, and people are not written as racist, even though they would have been. The only example I can think of is The Greatest Showman for a few months ago. there's two black acrobats in that, and one of them can't get with the white guy who runs the circus, I think. And the way it's written, they don't acknowledge that race is an issue. They just say they're different, and that's kind of just, it shows how people are scared of tackling the fact that race is an issue head on. They just kind of say, oh, they're different, you know why they're different, but well, no, if you don't tell people, they won't know. And this is what the story does. It acknowledges that, yes, over 50 years ago, people were prejudiced because they thought black people were inferior. And I just hate in fiction when they try and make everyone very accepting, even though people for centuries and still nowadays aren't very accepting of different people. So this, so I actually felt that when I was watching this story, yes, you do feel the jeopardy to the companions in particular, like Luke was saying. You actually do feel that they're in danger because they are a minority race, and it does impact my opinion about the villain being a weak villain. Actually, the villain isn't important. The villain of the piece is prejudice. It's the every white person who looks down on either the black people or the black companions, or sorry, the minority companions. They're all villains because the villain of the piece isn't an assassin from the future, it's prejudice. And I think having the theme of the story be that focused and actually shows you that this is an issue that's so big it needs to be tackled in this universe. It actually was really well done. I did like it. And because I was concerned that they'd shy away from it as well. But actually, the moment that I realised that this series of Who wasn't going to shy away from it, it was when Yaz was saying, quote, "Oh yeah, I get called a packy when I'm on duty," end quote. And I thought, whoa. I was actually shocked that the BBC would actually use that word. It didn't offend me, but it was more like, wow, they're actually willing to go there and they're willing to say, yeah, this is what people get called. This is how people are treated nowadays. And I really thought that was remarkably done. And obviously linking that back to the origins of the civil rights movement, it was handled so well with the character of Rosa. I mean, I'm not sure if we're going to talk about Rosa separately later on, because I have something to say about that. But yeah, you do feel the jeopardy to the companions, and the fact that the companions are a diverse range of people really is used to it's the story's advantaged here, and it's really well done. I really thought this story was really ballsy for not shying away from that. It really did face it, and linking back to the idea of Doctor Who being an educational show, people will be educated by this, and they will say actually people did treat minorities like this in the past. And how ridiculous is it that these prejudices were allowed to be the norm rather than be the exception? So yeah, prejudice being the enemy is a really strong message to come from a Doctor Who story, and I thought it was handled brilliantly in the writing and the characterization of all the white characters and also of all the minority characters as well. Really well done. I think there was a point in there somewhere.
No, very good. And James.
It's very much. It really does make up for Thin Ice, doesn't it? That was Mario quote as a travesty of an episode, just in every aspect of it. What it tried to do, it was just piss poor, wasn't it? So, and with this, it's shown what to do, and it was not to be preachy about it. It's to educate and just be honest. That's what it is. There were a lot of shoehorn stuff in Thin Ice where history is a whitewash, that line, and this episode really just it didn't ground itself in like this false world. It just felt completely in the real world, and that's what truly where this episode I think succeeded. I really loved the intimate moments with Yaz and Ryan, just whenever they were faced with a bit of adversary, or if they were just talking, like when they have to escape the room. I thought that was a really nice scene as well. That was it was quite wholesome in a way, just to see these two characters relate. I just talk about Yaz and Ryan. I really hope they don't end up together because it was that little flirty bit, but I guess we'll see where that goes. The Doctor played this fantastic part. Jodie Whittaker once again is knocking it out the park repeatedly. I think every single appearance that she has had as the Doctor. She was very much the guidance of history's very shitty. Be careful to the team, and it was also educating the viewer in that way. The ending was a bit CBBC-ish, with the watching and talk about Rosa on the monitor, but maybe it did need that, and I think that she is playing this rarely amazing teacher role, which I'm completely in love with at the moment. I just think it done everything right in this episode. There's not many negatives. I can't really think of any negatives, really. It was just very well thought out, and I hope to see more historicals that are accurate and that are truthful, really, I guess. Because history has a lot of weight to it, and I really think this didn't hold any punches with that weight.
Very good. And as you all sort of mentioned, this is a historical story. We might as well talk about it. Of course, last week you sort of mentioned that we wish this one could have been like a pure historical, but after seeing it, I think, well, for me anyway, I can sort of change my mind of that. I like the fact how we, like I mentioned, the sort of assassin guy from the future wasn't really the villain, but he sort of, like he added something to the story to like drift it along. So as like a historical story, what do we make of it in that sense? A lot of people are, go out and say this is probably one of the best, probably best of the new series and arguably up there of all time. So, Ben. Ben?
Sorry, I couldn't find the unmute button. It wouldn't load. That's right. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely up there with like Vincent and the Doctor in terms of new series. Like, it definitely has that punch like Vincent and the Doctor had, like at the end where, the Doctor takes Vincent to the museum. It kind of does have that. But it's definitely the best sort of historical what the new series has done, because I don't think the new series has done something so heavy. I think that this is the first big risk for Doctor Who in terms of story. Like, this is a whole massive risk of a story, and it really did pay off. And it definitely, you can see it, in line with like the Aztecs and Marco Polo. Like, it definitely deserves to be in that Hall of Fame of historical stories. I feel like there is going to be a massive legacy, like James said, but this is going to be, a story what's going to be talked about throughout the week. But yeah, I do think that it's going to be in the Hall of Fame of historicals, and probably the best one, because obviously it didn't have a weird CGI chicken dinosaur monster. So yeah, I think it's a good one for the Hall of Fame of historicals.
Absolutely. And Luke?
Yeah, I think I was one of the people who was thinking it should maybe be a pure historical before seeing it. Upon seeing it, I think it does need to have that time travel element. But I appreciate that the Black rights issue was still very much in the forefront. It wasn't shied away from at all, and it was the main point of the story. And as Kai mentioned, prejudice is the main villain in the way. But you do have that time travel element. I don't know, I just feel like maybe there needed to be a little bit more to it than him just being racist, really. Like, I get the message that racism does continue on into the future, unfortunately, with some of these things, but I don't know, maybe something a bit more could be done there. But yeah, as for actually including him in that, I think it does work. It does need to happen, because the story is about fixing time and whatnot, making sure things go on track, and it's something that Doctor Who hasn't really done before, I don't think, or maybe not in quite a while, because it is very much about them getting history back on track. There's not this big alien invasion happening or anything. And I think usually when it comes to keeping history on track, it's because there's an alien invasion happening that they've got to stop. Whereas this is actively partaking in that event, actively trying to make sure everything goes right, that you have that same bus driver on there and everything. And I do enjoy it for that. I think that it does very much try to set the scene of this history setting and then use that to its full advantage. It's not a backdrop. It is very much the forefront of this story. And one other comment along similar lines I would like to make is something that I think I even have said before, the idea of like having this racially diverse main cast and whatnot. This idea of sort of like casting colorblind in a way that sort of like loads of people have said, to do with on-screen stuff like that. if you really care about diversity, you should be casting like colorblind, like not having it. But when it comes to writing a story like this, you do need that in there. And, you know, you needed to cast Ryan as a black man and Yaz as from Pakistan and whatnot. You needed to have that in there. Or actually, it's not Is she from, where is she from actually? I can't remember. Have they established?
I think it's Pakistani heritage. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, you do need to have that casting there for the story they were trying to tell, really. So that's sort of like a rebuttal to that argument of if what's called diversity mattering and whatnot, that you shouldn't cast color. You sort of do need to cast color, really, especially when it comes to things like this. So that's like a rebuttal to that, I would say, and is very important in this story that you do have that dynamic of the black guy, the Pakistani heritage, and then you've got white granddad and white female doctor. You know, that is quite important to the dynamic that's at play here, and just because of how history is, that is important to how they play into it, really. So yeah, as a historical, I think it's nice to have something a bit different in the way it plays out, in the way that it's not trying to stop an alien invasion, it's actively making sure this event happens. In some ways that did clunk for me a bit, like I think the racist bus driver, it almost went a bit too far with that when they like went by the river and were just like saying, oh, the blacks are going to be on the bus, and he's like, what, I can't have those blacks on the bus, and then just rushes off to go sort that out. Funnily enough, it just felt a bit too like much like he was dedicated to his job and to being racist. Like, I think it could have been more casual, but just because of how the story needs to flow, they did need to do that, unfortunately. But ultimately, it's just a minor flaw I have in an otherwise very good episode, really. So yeah, definitely loving the historical setting, and that they are really using it to its full advantage, not just having it be a backdrop for once.
Very good. And Kai, if you want to like mention your thoughts on Rose as well, because I don't really have like a dedicated point to it. So if you want to mention like your thoughts on that, now you can.
Okay. Was it just about the idea of this being a historical story?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Obviously, we've said before that historical stories have mainly just been a setting for an alien invasion, you know, to give it a bit of variety and to use the advantage of the time travel elements. But the focus has never really actually been on the historical setting, and this is for the first time since probably Vincent and the Doctor, in the way that people were prejudiced against Vincent for having mental illness. Again, this is dealing with prejudice of black people in a world full of white people. So yeah, probably since Vincent and the Doctor, a historical story has never really had a reason to exist more than for the sake of variety and for using the established Doctor Who format. And yeah, for that reason, I think it will stand up as being one of the stronger or more at least standout historicals, because at the very least it has a purpose. And back to the original purpose of Doctor Who being to educate people, which is when this was back in the 1960s, before it became just like a light entertainment time travel show with adventures and stuff like that. Back in the 60s, the point was to educate people. That's what we had in the Hartnell era, more historicals than any other time after that, because the idea was just to tell kids, look, kids, these are the Aztecs. Learn about the Aztecs. This is the French Revolution. Learn about the French Revolution. But nowadays, I think rather than just being taught facts about a period in history, we do need to be told the message behind the history and saying, right, this happened because of this. You don't remember this, but this was really important. The reason that you're here now is because of these events. And obviously nowadays with Brexit and Donald Trump and all that stuff, we do need to reestablish that idea of being inclusive. And I think this story is obviously was written with that in mind, I'm thinking. And also the diverse TARDIS crew was written with that in mind. But as for being relevant for today, yes, this is a story that definitely needed to be told, and for that reason, the story has a purpose, and that purpose is gives it kind of a reason to exist. So it's definitely going to feel a lot stronger than other historical settings in Modern Who. As for Rosa, another major worry I had was that I felt that if this was like another story even from Revival of Who, the Doctor would influence Rosa Parks' major event. So you'd have like an example being the Shakespeare Code. The Doctor offhand just quotes lots of lines and inspires him to write plays. That's a kind of facetious way of looking at it. But since this is dealing with the actions of one woman affecting the civil rights movement, it would have felt really bad if Rosa was kind of down on her luck. She wasn't inspired, and then the Doctor gave a big rousing speech that encouraged her to stay seated on the bus and to have this movement. What I love about this is actually the Doctor barely speaks to Rosa, and when it comes down to it, Rosa's actions aren't even affected by the Doctor whatsoever. The only effect the Doctor has on the plot is to ensure that the circumstances for her making that decision come to pass, so history can occur in the usual way. The character of Rosa never changes. From the beginning to from the very end, she is adamant this is the right thing to do. Obviously, we have that flashback to 12 years ago where she accepted getting off the bus to get on the other exit. But as for Rosa in 1955, she's adamant that this is the right thing to do. And I love the fact that it wasn't the Doctor who helped her make that decision. This was something that was running through Rosa's character all the way through. And in the end, because it would have been a bit cheap to say the Doctor inspired the movement, because this is an external force interfering in quite a emotionally driven part of history, a very human part of history. So having the Doctor be responsible for that would have felt really cheap and would have just lessened an iconic image of Rosa Parks. The fact they wrote her as being the one who makes that decision and the Doctor has no involvement in that was definitely one of the strongest elements for this. And I think the actress whose name has just escaped me played a very, very good, strong portrayal of Rosa as just being a normal woman who's clearly very, I don't want to use the phrase, she's a strong, independent woman, but you can tell from the off that she's just portrayed very realistically as a woman in this world, and she knows this world is wrong, but she has to make the most of it so tomorrow can be better. So going for the performance and going for the way she was written and how she was involved in the plot was a major worry I had, but I think they just pulled that off fantastically.
Sweet. And James?
I think I covered pretty much a lot of the worry aspect perfectly. So I'm going to focus on just a little bit on how this kind of has parallels with past historicals, because my favourite historical Doctor Who's ever done is The Massacre. Wonderful story that is a character-driven story, because the first Doctor's not even in this story for the main bulk of it. It's mostly Stephen, and I think what that episode super succeeds in with is that it focuses on the characters and the people who are around at that time. And Stephen's always begging the Doctor, you've got to at least interfere in this event or just save someone. And the Doctor's like, history needs to stay how it is. And then it has that little educational bit showing what happened with I think loose cannon. They added in the paintings of the slaughtering going on, because there was in that episode it was broadcast with the sounds of people being slaughtered, and the whole moral of that story was that, similar to the Aztecs, you can't fuck with history. History is crap, and you need to let it take its course. And I think that's what Jodie Whittaker, the 13th Doctor, really takes that stance in this episode, especially towards the end when Graham's like, I can't do this. And she's just like, we have to be a part of history, because especially Graham had that special sort of almost relationship with Rosa Parks through Grace. So it was like, I don't want to be a part of this. It's like, you have to be. And I think that's just what it absolutely succeeded in. Jodie Whittaker, just every single episode reminds me of a different Doctor, because she's just the perfect cast. And she very much took that first Doctor role, especially in the educational aspect of the show. It was just done in a marvelous way, I really feel. I just can't have any faults. It was so carefully done. The fact that we had this time traveler, it didn't even dampen the episode, because I was just like, oh god, it's going to be a time traveling racist, which it was. And it would have actually been nice to maybe have had some I'd say some thought for why he thinks that. But again, it was just the whole idea of prejudice in general as the theme, not one specific person. And that's just what it really drove home well. And if it's taught people and educated, both young and old, it's a good thing, isn't it? Because I know people on Twitter, they didn't even know about Rosa Parks. So the episode's mission was accomplished.
Completely agree. And so we get a lot of praise, but we might as well just go into like the standouts and negatives. Any particular scenes that you sort of liked, and if there are any negatives for you at all. So James, you've been like the last one recently, so you can start it off this one. We go the way around.
Positives. This TARDIS team's perfect, isn't it? I love the dynamic. Every single episode, it just gets better and better. I love Yaz. She rarely got to do some stuff in her own. She's almost kind of a bit like the motherly defensive kind of character of the group. Ryan is the more sort of sporadic and with these little bits of brilliance of creativity. Jodie is the 13th Doctor, is the inventor, the smart one, the one who comes up with all of these plans, and Graham is kind of the building blocks of all of them put together. Everybody complements each other and puts something unique forward into this group, and it's spectacular to watch every single week. We're by episode 3. And the fact that so many people love these characters, that is amazing, isn't it? So it just shows the writing and care that Chris Chibnall has put into these characters, because you can tell which bits he did right. Whenever Grace was mentioned, I kind of think that was what Chris Chibnall would write in that little intimate moment with Yaz and Ryan. I think that was written by Chibnall as well, just the very character moments. It's spectacular and it gets developed even further. The Doctor has this sense of mystery once again. It would have actually been quite nice to maybe see them arguing with the Doctor at one point. As far as negatives go, absolutely none, really. My only negative would maybe be the fact that the theme song wasn't at the end, because I thought it was a little bit awkward the way the pop music, which was fantastic, it really complemented that scene so well. That's positive in itself. It stopped. We got that little bit with the Doctor and everyone, and then it started again with the credits. So it felt a little bit disjointed, but it really worked well for the next time, I guess. But I don't know. I think that that's just a little nitpick, I guess. The pop music, I think, worked tremendously. In fact, the music in this episode was absolutely perfect in the fact that everything was complemented. The fact when Rosa gets on the bus, the happy 1950s music stop, and it gets a little bit tense in a way. It's just a spectacular piece of television, as I said before, not just Doctor Who television in general. And I think this is what this series is completely going for, and it's absolutely succeeding in. And I just can't wait to see what we get more of this. Just spectacular stuff. Again, with negatives, I think we've kind of spoke about them all pretty much, and I don't really think there is any to be had. It played its cards right. It was careful of what it said. It was hard hitting. It set the tone immediately. Just fantastic.
Very good. And Kai.
Yeah, standouts for me. To go on to the companions, I've not been as enamoured with the companions so far. They just felt like they're filling roles, and they did feel like a bit like an insertion of diversity. I've obviously spoken now that this spectrum of diversity in the companions works for this story. And just on a note of that, if they do go into the past a bit more, I'd rather that they did acknowledge there was still prejudice. Calling back to my point that I don't like when everyone's just so accepting. So if they do a past story, can at least acknowledge that they should be a bit wary, rather than just saying, "Oh, this is the one story where we do that. It doesn't happen in any other time. Just the 1950s in Alabama." But anyway, that's not a point. In terms of this, is the first time the companions have actually felt like proper rounded characters for me that contribute to the TARDIS crew. In this story, they all have a great part to play. There's obviously even Graham, with his connection to driving buses, is used to tell the audience about James Blake, who obviously didn't know the name of James Blake, and having him saying, "Oh yeah, well Grace mentioned to me about this bus driver." I thought that's a really good way of doing it, actually. having it not only connect to Grace, so we have this running theme of her presence kind of hanging over this group, but also the fact that we're using the jobs of the companions as a way of conveying information rather than just having an exposition dump. Because they could have just turned around and say, "Oh yeah, his name was James Blake. How do you know that? Learned it at school." No, you're actually using these characters and utilizing them to get your educational message across. So there's obviously Graham connection to the bus, and also this is a way of getting him to talk to James Blake, which is a scene I quite like. Graham just playing pool with James and just talking about that, just being bus drivers and how to move the plot forward. There's Ryan, who's had some good funny lines. He still can't act for shit, unfortunately. I still really hate hearing him speak because he's so awkward and doesn't act at all, but he has had some good lines. The scene in Rosa Parks' house where she's just saying, "Sorry, Mr. King, what did you just say, Rosa Parks?" I actually did laugh out loud at that. So he's starting to warm to me, even though it doesn't look like his performance is actually going to get any better. But the writing has saved the character a bit more for me. And then there's Yaz, who's come into her own, obviously trying to find out all this information about Rosa Parks. She's using her police training. So the fact this story just seems like when they were assembling the TARDIS crew, they thought, right, we're going to have this story. This story has to be tailored to our three companions. And you can tell because they all complement the story so well. This is the first time I've really felt anything for David Bradley's character. I mean, he's given an okay performance for us so far, but I really did feel for Graham when he says, "I don't want to be part of history. I don't want to be a part of this." And then just to have to sit there to be the widow to a black woman, having to be one of the white people who has to make her move. I thought that I really felt for Graham in that scene. So it's probably the first time I felt connected to the companions. So it does give me optimism for future episodes when, at this point, I felt like, have they just oversaturated a TARDIS with bodies, really, rather than characters? But this has definitely been the first time the characters have stood out for me. What else is there? There's some good direction. There's a really intense direction at times. All the extreme close-ups on the 13th Doctor and on Cresco were really well. And also the extreme close-ups in the final scene on Rosa. You really did feel the performance coming through there. So there's some really nice direction in this episode. And a little note that I did like, in every scene where the TARDIS crew are around, I've only noticed this on the second viewing, all the extras are staring at them and talking about them. Because when they get on the bus and Yaz is talking about whether she can sit with them on the white seats, you can just see the extras just looking around at them. And I've noticed in every single scene, there's always people looking. That's the eye of a director saying, right, you're not just extras, you're actually contributing to this. So it does make it feel really intense that any moment now these our heroes could be just set upon by people who are just who can just be who are just going who could just set upon them any minute because of their prejudices. And again, it goes back to the villain of the piece being prejudiced. You have a constant shadow of fear for our heroes, and more so than lots of other Doctor Who stories where you just think, oh, they're safe for now until they meet the big bad. Every shot in this, you're thinking literally someone could come along and fuck up their plans. And same with this scene in the hotel with the policeman. You have just have that intensity just obviously strengthened a lot more, and they didn't shy away from saying mongrels and things like that. And then I think that's my favorite Jodie scene as well, with her saying, "There's no one in this hotel room that doesn't have a right to be here." And you're thinking, you can just feel the kind of disgust that she feels towards these people who are clearly ignorant enough to believe this stuff. So I did get a real strong feeling for Jodie from that performance. She's a really good. She does intense quite well, but in a very subtle way, not like in a Capaldi way where he's just like furrows his eyebrows. He's intense. You do get a kind of sharp edge of cold in her portrayal at times, rather than trying to make it too ham-handed. Negatives. The only real negative I can think of, it's not the history of. So it's not the history of Rosa Parks back in the TARDIS. It was the fact they had to name an asteroid after her. I really don't see what the significance of that is. She's so important. Even in the future, she's named after an asteroid.
No. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
I googled it, and yeah, it is actually a real asteroid, which
Hmm.
I kind of like because I think RTD was so responsible for this as well. Oh, this is a famous person, a historical figure, and then there's this thing in the future named
Yeah.
after them because they're
It did
so
remind me of
important. And
it did remind me of the Unicorn and the Wasp saying people never stop reading her. She's one of the most famous authors
yeah,
of all time. It did make me think of that, but there is a better way you can do it. At least have it mean something rather than just say, "Oh, by the way, she's so famous, she's going to have an asteroid named after her." Yes, but what does that mean? Does that mean anything? That's why
well,
I'd rather they just left it with just saying in the future she's rewarded by the president with the greatest medal that a civilian can get. And I thought, yeah, that could have been it. That could have been left. You didn't have to extend it
if
into
it's a
space and just
real
ham-handed away.
thing, if it's a real thing, I don't think it has to justify itself because life justifies it pretty much. But
Mm.
I do get what you mean in case they ever do try and do that shit again, like with Agatha Christie and Unicorn and the Wasp.
It just made me think of that. I thought, that's a bit ham-fisted like that. But
Just
there are
that-
other ways they could have done it, but that's what they chose. Sorry, what was it, Luke?
It is just that they need to name asteroids. So they do just pick like random names of famous people, don't they? Like as you say, it doesn't really mean anything that it's named after her. It's
Yeah.
just like showing that she is so famous because of what she did that she gets an asteroid named after her. But you don't necessarily need that because she is famous enough anyway.
She has justified it herself, obviously, so there doesn't need to be justification why she's remembered in the future. I just thought it was a bit of a ham-fisted way of saying, oh yeah, she has influence even into space. Like, you could have done that a bit better. But she's I think just as you said, the CBBC moment, the Blue Peter moment of saying, yep, she was rewarded in 1999. I thought that was enough because it is going back to the education theme as well. So yeah, I think that's everything. Oh, and also the villain's a bit hollow, but kind of needs to be for the point of the story, really.
Very nice, Luke.
Yeah, so I think with negatives, I have sort of gone over most of them, and I think for the most part, like a lot of my negatives are necessary evils in a way. They're sort of like these things that have to happen to keep the plot going, like the racist time traveler and the fact that the bus driver just really hates blacks. Like, not just he isn't just racist when they're around. It's just like he has to go and drive his bus just to stop them sitting where they're not supposed to be. Like on his day off, he decides to go and do that. But yeah, like that's just something to get the plot really going along. And yeah, like as we were talking about the TARDIS team, I love that they are all well-developed characters. They are very much standing on their own 2 feet, each of them. They're not just there to like fill space or anything. And it doesn't feel like any of them are redundant in this story. It makes great use of them, great use of the characters, as has been mentioned before about Graham being a bus driver, playing into that, and so like how it ties back into Grace, and is her character being very important to both Graham and Ryan as well. I think that was beautifully done, how they got that in there, in that nice little scene in the hotel. There's just so many nice little scenes. I think, unlike the previous 2 episodes where I had some problems with pacing at the time during it, I think this one is perfect length, mostly perfect pace as well. I think it does flow very well all the way through. It doesn't need anything extra on it, any extra time. It is very much suited to this 50-minute format they have here, and feels like, because of just how cinematic it's shot, feels like a movie in some ways, like this small 50-minute movie. And that was what Stephen Moffat was trying to go for with series 7, I believe. He wanted like a movie every week. Here it feels like we're actually getting that, especially here. It does feel very much like you are in the 1950s Alabama here. It does feel like that setting. Whereas I think sometimes historicals, you don't quite get that in New Who. Like, it does feel very much like a set sometimes, but here, even though it was, where was it shot again? It was shot in South Africa somewhere, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think the last episode was as well. So there are a few South African scenes as well. I think it was mainly because it's a warm climate, so you get that natural hot look to the scenes rather than, say, if you filmed in England. So
that's true. And they were both.
So it seems
the same
to have done a lot over there.
Yeah,
the hot deserts of Wales.
Yeah.
Go do one, Kai.
Yeah, it does very much feel like the right setting, and I do really appreciate it for that as well. It feels like the production was dedicated to getting this right, getting this feeling very much like 1950s Alabama, and you also get that in how it's portrayed with the characters and whatnot. It does very much set that scene and set this faraway world that isn't too far away from at all, and it's actually scarily close in many ways. But yeah, it's just negatives, really, isn't it, that we talk about? I think there was something else I was saying, but it's completely gone now, I'm afraid. Oh yeah, now I remember what I was going to say. It was about that song at the end, like I think, like the pop song. Is it Adele who sings it or something?
I'm really clueless when it comes to pop songs, but
yeah,
I had the name up. One sec, because it's called
Laura Day or something like that. Rising.
It's called Rise Up, I think. By this was just googling like the words just rise up, and the song came up from 2015.
Yeah.
Let me try and find it.
Like, I get that some other shows do that now, so it's sort of like a modern thing to do and does make Doctor Who feel modern in a way. It's just a trend that I don't like in shows anyway. And like sometimes it works, but in Doctor Who, I didn't appreciate it too much. I don't, especially over the credits as well. It just felt a bit odd. I feel like you could have got Segun Akinola, is his name? The new
Segun
Yeah.
Akinola.
yeah, Segun Akinola. I think you could have got him to do some very emotional, strong music there. Like I get, like it does have the impact how it is muted and whatnot. The like it's just the music you can hear. You don't hear anything that's actually happening on screen, like the Foley noises. I think it's called, like the technical term for it. I think that worked fine. I think the song in a way worked. Like I'm just not a massive fan of the use of it. It does feel a bit like it throws you out of it being Doctor Who for a second and took me out of the story, to be honest. At least it wasn't.
I found it. I found the artist, Andra Day. Finally found it.
Yeah.
So it's been around for a while, this song. I've never heard it before, but fair enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad it wasn't a song I'd heard before, at least, because I think then that would take you out of it even more.
It's more just Doctor Who trying to set itself as a serious drama.
But it's not a trend I even like in serious dramas. Like sometimes it can be done right. Here, I don't think it really was, but it's not something that bothers me too much.
I will admit it did stand out to me, even though the song does complement it. It did stick out a bit like a sore thumb during the scene.
It's Doctor Who, you're not expecting it.
Yeah, I think that might be it.
Yeah, so, maybe on rewatch that works a bit better, but just on that first watch, it did make me jump out of the story a bit and think, really, this? But yeah, I think for negatives, I don't really have that much. So yeah.
All right, fair enough. I think for the whole music thing, as well as add in as well, I think they are trying to aim towards like the mainstream audience now, and I think from their point of view, that would work fine. If you get me.
Yeah, I get. Yeah, I think it's something that bothers me a bit, but I understand why they did it, because it is something that is popular to do in dramas these days. So if it helps Doctor Who in the long run, then so be it, I guess.
It's progressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Ben.
It's one of those episodes where you're pretty proud to be a Doctor Who fan. Like, you know, if somebody said, "Oh, you're a Doctor Who fan," like, yeah, check out Rosa. It's a great episode. But going on to the music, it's very much like Glorious, where you have to look at the lyrics of the song, where you think, you know what, that goes perfectly. So I'm a massive fan of the music because I feel like the music really enhanced the scene. Like it really played with and obviously upscaled the emotion of the scene. And I just think the music in general, especially the beginning, you know, with like the 1943 and then we get the transition to 53. With the 50s music, you know, I feel like that really sets the tone. Well, not really the tone, but kind of sets the scene. It's a nice little bit of, you know, world building, I guess, within it. I think the villain, I know we've said a bit of negativity about him, but I feel like it was a nice, subtle villain. It wasn't, you know, the story didn't need an in-your-face monster, you know, a green, you know, one-eyed monster. I think that it was quite a nice, you know, subtle villain. You know, he wasn't really used that much, but he didn't need to be used an awful lot because he was only, you know, changing small events in history so his plan works. So I thought that was Beautifully done. The direction was great. The transitions between scenes, like you've got obviously the Doctor and gang going onto the bus, and then you see the bus drive away, and you get to them by Rosa's work. So I thought that was a really nice transition. The TARDIS looks absolutely beautiful in the sunlight. Like, I was just blown away by how beautiful it looked, and I feel massive standout was obviously the final 5 minutes was just so powerful and just made my rating for the story go up. And I think that Jodie, I've seen a lot of stills on Twitter of just Jodie looking kind of disappointed in herself, knowing that she can't do anything about it, but knowing that, I just think that was a really nice bit of powerful performance by Jodie. And I feel like this is the first story where I actually thought, you know what, Jodie's doing a good job, where I actually started to feel like she wasn't a caricature and a Poundland version of Matt Smith. I could kind of see what they were trying to do with Jodie's Doctor. And I feel like the humour within this episode, what there is, like the Steve Jobs thing with with Bradley Walsh, and the whole Banksy thing with Jodie was nice. But my negative,
that was fucking brilliant. Sorry.
Yeah,
I did laugh my ass off.
My negative is the bloody sonic screwdriver. Like, I'm already fed up of it. Like, I feel like they've just overkilled it already. Just going, by the way, we've got a toy out. Like, surely Jodie could have a gizmo of, detecting Artron energy, because obviously in the first episode, she's capable of building stuff. So why not give her a device instead of overkilling the sonic screwdriver? We're only in week 3 already, and I'm already fed up of the sonic. I mean,
it would have been quite fun if, because he can't hurt her, if she was just pulling out, like, device after device, scanning him and doing readings. I thought that could have been quite funny, but it is quite just limited to one Sonic, isn't it?
Because it's like what you said, Jodie, to you, kind of feels a bit like John in the first episode, building gadgets and that.
Oh, yeah.
Then show us that, and I feel like, we're going Rings of Akaten type of material here with Jodie with the Sonic. Like, it just, I know they said it was, a Sheffield Swiss Army knife, but can we just have a bit of variety in gizmos? Give the Sonic a bit of a break. Only use it when you need to.
I think that's something that quite a few people are picking up on as well. So, it's become a bit of a prominent thing.
Yeah, I'd agree there. I think it also needs to, if they are going to use the Sonic like that, it needs to like somehow display to the audience how it works in a way, because like when she's like scanning, it's just always doing the same thing. It's always just glowing. Like you never get any different noises or anything that I've picked up. Like it could like beep a bit, and then like the beeps become more closer together as she gets closer to the Artron energy. Like a what's it called? There's one of them in the Daleks. It's a device used for detecting radiation. What?
Oh,
the name's completely got. But you know how like that. That's has that weird noise, and then the noise gets more intense as you get closer to it. If you must use the sonic screwdriver for that sort of thing, have it be like that. Have it sort of like make a bit more noise, beep a bit more as it gets closer to the Artron energy itself, just to like show the audience it actually working, rather than it just being something the Doctor can magically understand.
I want to go one up from that and have it talk to her and say, "I've just scanned this person," in the voice of Alexa.
Scan this.
With the voice of Peter Capaldi.
It's a racist.
It's a racist.
Punch
From the future. Punch him in the face. No, Peter, we don't do that. We talk. Okay. Whatever you say, darling. Don't call me darling.
Oh.
Good. Ben, is that it for your science and negatives?
Yeah, that's about it, really.
About it. Fair enough.
I think they made the toys sell well, actually, wouldn't they? Having Peter's voice.
Yeah,
That would actually be quite cool.
Oh, he's not universally loved, though, is he? So he can't have that.
Oh,
No.
make it David
yeah.
Tennant. Oh, yes. I just scanned this racist.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a racist. I haven't seen one of those in ages.
That's brilliant, that. Oh, you are beautiful. Thank you.
Like,
Yeah. I'm burning up a star just to scan this racist.
Oh, man.
Oh,
Jesus.
good fun. It's all good fun.
Before we go any further with that one, all right. So to rate this one, I think we've sort of got an idea on where we're going with this one, with the amount of positivity we've had. But Ben, out of 10.
I'm gonna give it 9 uprising buses.
Very good. Luke.
Yeah, I'll go 9 as well, to be honest.
Fair enough. Kai.
I think I'll give this mother a 10.
Ooh, bloody hell, fair play. And James.
If I have this level of enjoyment on a rewatch, definitely will be edging towards a 10. But just for now, just play it safe. I only watched it once. I'm going to give it a solid 9 out of 10.
Fair dues that. And I agree. I'll go 9 out of 10 as well. So another successful week. We've had 3 for 3 so far for Series 11. And
What's wrong with us? Why are we so negative? Why are we so positive? I mean,
oh no, it's weird.
it's making me feel
It's
ill.
a good
I can't,
show again.
I can't associate Doctor Who with positivity anymore.
Oh, there we go. So we'll see where we go from next week. Hopefully, the positivity will stay. So hopefully, like I mentioned last week, it'll be back on my channel, and hopefully, anyway, if not,
Yeah.
same place. But anyway, thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Bye bye.
The spiders in Sheffield.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.